Welcome to Skinwalker Ranch. It was 1994 when the Shermans bought their dream 480-acre ranch in Utah. When they first checked out the dwellings on the property, they couldn't believe the deadbolts holding the doors shut or how reinforced the windows were. They also would find very large chains in the yards that looked like they were supposed to hold back a very large animal. It wasn't long before they realized why the previous owners did this. On a dreary day shortly after they moved in, the Shermans were moving their prize-winning cattle into their new grazing pen with lots of acreage. Everything was going smooth when they saw a large wolf approaching from a distance. Eventually the beast would come up to them, acting very docile. It even let the kids pet it. When suddenly, one of the baby cattle stuck its nose outside of the pen. The beast instantly leaped to the pen 20 feet and grabbed the calf by its nose, the calf crying out as he tore it apart. So quickly, Mr. Sherman pulls his .357 off his hip. He fires 3 rounds into the beast with nothing happening. As Mr. Sherman unloaded his .357, the beast seemed unfazed. He would take a couple steps back and shake it off, and go back to ripping the calf apart. Well, good thing Mr. Sherman, the rancher that he is, had a backup. He went behind the seat of his truck and grabbed out his .30-30 lever action. He took a shot at the beast and hit it in the chest. A large chunk of meat and hair would fly off it, landing in a pool of blood. The beast turns and looks at him, almost stunned, and then slowly trots away. After the beast leaves his eyesight, he begins following the tracks. They would go on for about a mile, when suddenly 4 tracks turned into 2, and he was walking as a humanoid. He then would follow them into a field another 100 feet, where they completely disappeared, as if the beast had gone up. And it gets weirder yet. When pointing out the type of wolf to authorities, he chose the direwolf that had been extinct for 10,000 years. Things settled down for a week or so after the gruesome direwolf incident, but it wasn't long before the odd happenings picked back up. They all seemed to be targeted towards Gwen. She literally began to think she was going insane. She would come home from grocery shopping, unpack all the groceries, put them away. Then she'd leave the room for a second, and when she returned, the groceries would be back in the grocery bags, as if she had never unpacked them. In the morning, she would regularly take showers. So she would go into the bathroom, lock the door behind her, then put the brush and towel next to the tub. When she would go to get out, the towel and brush would be gone, found somewhere in another room. It was getting to the point she was going to tell Terry that she was losing her mind. Until one day, Terry walked into the house, asking where his post hole digger was. He leaned it up against a pole as he was messing with the wire, and then turned around, it was gone. He'd find it weeks later 70 feet in a tree. Crazy part, the tool weighed 70 pounds. After these incidents, the Shermans were starting to really wonder whether something was wrong with their homestead. About a week before the discovery of the post hole digger at the top of the tree, Mr. Sherman's nephew would come up for a few days and get a tour of the property. Terry's son would also tag along. The day went by fast and they lost track of time, so it was nightfall by the time they headed back to the homestead. While on their way back, Mr. Sherman noticed a set of headlights he had noticed before driving along their fence line. He figured it was a group of guys hunting without permission, so he made his way towards them hastily. The light continued to approach him until suddenly, it seemed like it was getting further away, so he broke out in stride. The boys followed suit and he began to wonder why there was no engine sound. They were able to get within 100 yards when suddenly the light left the ground and flew over the treetops. Terry and the boys stood in shock. That fall, the orbs were heavy, ranging from red to blue, each color more malevolent than the rest. Terry would see orbs all that fall, ranging from blue to red to orange. The blue ones being the most malevolent. He called them the blue meanies. After a tough winter and losing a bunch of cattle, Terry was at his wit's end, but his pride kept him going. Until one particular night, when he was sitting on his front porch with his 3 prize hunting dogs. Suddenly, they start growling. He looks up, and sure enough, a blue orb pops out over the wood line. The orb starts coming towards him, and the dogs were at the end of their chain. They called the blue orbs blue meanies because when they got close to you, they instilled fear. Terry felt they gave off a frequency that absolutely horrified their prey. So out of pure instinct, he lets the dogs loose. They pushed the orb into the thicket. For some reason, its frequency didn't work on the dogs. Terry thought, yes, I finally got a victory, when suddenly all 3 dogs yelped. He wanted to go check but feared for his life. Next morning, he found all 3 dogs. They were in a heaping pile, cauterized. That was it for Terry. After all of his negative experiences, Terry was at his wit's end. His wife lost her job, and the kids were failing in school. They were sleeping in one room at night because of the entities that would stand at the foot of their beds. Him and wife Gwen finally decided to put the house up for sale, and they approached the papers to tell their story. They would receive much criticism from the townsfolk, but Terry's story would end up going nationwide. And it just so happens the article caught the eye of billionaire Robert Bigelow. Bigelow was a businessman who had a fascination with the paranormal. So he started an institute called NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Science. He saw Skinwalker Ranch as a perfect opportunity for his studies. So he would purchase the ranch for $200,000 from the Shermans. The only stipulation would be that they hire Mr. Sherman to run the ranch, because he wanted to see what they come up with. He would employ former military for security and over 25 scientists with PhDs. The hunter would now become the hunted. So Bigelow purchased the ranch in July of '96, and he was ready to move in September of that year. But before he moved in, he went there to have a little camping adventure and see if maybe they'd see something. So he invited some close friends from the NIDS team and they went and camped for a couple nights. The first night, there was no unusual activity, but the second night would quickly change that. Mr. Bigelow and his friends would set up camp right next to an abandoned building. The second night, they would start a fire and shoot the shit over a couple beers, just like any normal camping trip. Then Mr. Bigelow heard a branch break. What was that? One buddy, oh, it's just an old coon. There ain't nothing about this place. Then another breaks, but this time it's high up in a tree. See, just an old coon. Mr. Bigelow glances up, and that's when he sees it. A pitch black beast with yellow glowing eyes. To avoid panic, Bigelow keeps it to himself. He watches it the whole time. The beast just sat there as if observing. Shortly after their camping trip, Bigelow had moved his team in and their equipment. It was September of '96. The team consisted of 25 crew members, ranging from vets to military personnel. He set up 3 towers with somebody on watch in each of them around the clock. There were soldiers with night vision goggles patrolling the property day and night. Once set up, the remainder of '96 was actually really calm. So calm that some of the crew had even started to doubt Gwen and Terry's stories. That was until March 9th, 1997. It was midday and Gwen and Terry were tagging cows in the pasture. They had tagged a calf and walked about 300 yards to tag another, when suddenly their dog started growling. They looked over and the mother of the previous calf was jumping around. When they walked back over to investigate, they were horrified at what they saw. In the 45-minute gap, something had gutted and cleaned the calf with no blood remaining. Just his head, spine, and legs. It even removed the ear with a tag. Weird happenings would continue to take place on the ranch. Shermans were still losing cattle to mutilations, and Orbs became a regular thing. Probably the most frightening event was experienced by 2 of the soldiers who happened to be Russian. They were out on night patrol walking the top of the ridge. One of them had night goggles, the other didn't. As they stood at the edge of the ridge looking out, the one with the night goggles scanned the land, and he noticed something. A small light popped up in an opening at the foot of the ridge, which was probably 100 feet down. "Do you see that?" said the soldier with the night goggles. "Do you see it?" The one that didn't have night goggles asked to see, but the one who had them wouldn't give them up. That's when he pulls his scope up. "Yeah, I see it, I see it." A small light began to form, and it began to get bigger and bigger. As it was growing, the one with night goggles said, "I can see to the other side, I can see to the other side. It's a portal." "Oh my God," he says, "there's something coming out of it." He saw 2 black arms reach through from the other side as the beast crawled through it. Once through it stood up and looked their way. After the beast jumps out the portal and looks at them, it starts running up the hill at superhuman speed. Its long legs covering 20 foot of stride. The soldiers say they can remember the clay crushing beneath its feet as it ran up the ridge. As it got closer and closer, they got ready to fire, but the thing just ran right past them. It ran past them about 30 feet away. They sighed a huge sigh of relief. One thing we can say about the Skinwalker is that it doesn't kill humans. It does know the boundary between humans and animal. Bigelow would keep the ranch from '96 to 2016. Many say that his studies weren't a success because he didn't get any real evidence. He only got pictures at night. Whatever the beings were, he said, knew about the cameras and they avoided them at all costs. Though when asked if people don't believe in Skinwalker Ranch, what he would say to them, he'd say, "You're clinically insane." He would sell Skinwalker Ranch in 2016 to Adamantium Holdings for about $4 million. This is owned by Brandon Fugel. History Channel even started a show, but it seemed to mysteriously have stopped. All right, my nightgod fam. I hope you all enjoyed that. That was one from the archives. I'm going to post another one here soon, also from the archives, but a really good story, the Dyatlov Pass incident. So if you like that video, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can get alerted every time I post. Check out Dyatlov Pass incident next.